Great. How's it going?
Pretty damn good. How you doing?
Good, good. We're slowly losing light here, based in New York. So,
Oh, I was about to say, you must be on the East Coast. Yeah. I won't tell you what it's like here because that's always miserable when you're on the East Coast and some LA guy is like, yeah, 85 and perfect.
yeah, it's bright and sunny always. So, you've been on my television screen and a lot of other people's television screens since like 1998. You've played different characters throughout your career. I was wondering, is there like a specific character where you're like, oh, I understand this guy like inside and out. I relate to this guy in specific moment at time. Probably not Christopher Dunch, though. Hoping not.
Well, I mean, you know, part of the trick of playing Dunch was finding those pieces, right? Of finding like I would like to think that I'm not a sociopath. Regardless, I'm not a surgeon. So even if I am, I can't do as much damage as he did. But I think I totally recognize how letting your ego go unchecked can lead you down some very dark paths. And I also totally recognize how if you were to allow you, like, I mean, actors, we do this all the time. If you allow yourself to like believe the good press or the bad press for that matter, but if you allowed yourself to believe that you were this wonderful fiction, right? That when that fiction is taken away from you, it's psychologically really, really confrontational, which I think is part of what led him down such a dark and destructive place, is that he, for his own reasons, needed to believe in this fictitious version of himself as the great doctor and the great man and the genius and the beloved wonderkin. And as he got farther and farther away from that in reality, he had to work psychologically harder and harder to maintain that fiction for himself. And ultimately that disconnection, it crushed him. I mean, it just, I think, collapsed his psyche. And now look, he should absolutely be in prison for what he did. But, you know, when you're asking me, is there, you know, I would hope that in each character that I've played, I wouldn't say that this is 100% true, but I would like to believe in each character that I've played, there are the pieces of the person, man or boy, that I absolutely recognize. And that's the jumping off place for playing that character.
And I imagine being in the awards conversation might feel a little bit weird given that this is an actual person you're playing who like ultimately, caused so much tragedy. Like how is that for you?
I mean, yeah, there's that even without the awards conversation, you feel a bit like an emotional vampire, right? So there's an additional layer of responsibility that you have as an actor or director or producer on something where you're telling not just a true story, but a contemporary true story where the people involved are still very much, some of them are still very much alive. And the repercussions of the event or the events are still deeply felt by the people who are left behind. So that exists with or without the follow on the awards conversation. And I guess I hadn't really thought about this too much, but I am willing to say that I'm proud of the work that I did, but proud of the work that we did. I am proud of this show, and I think it deals with the subject matter responsibly. And I think it's a good show. So I don't feel terrible about being in conversation about this difficult story. But maybe it's just because I'm deluding myself. I don't know. Maybe I'll think about this tonight.
And even though you don't get into the business for awards, it must feel nice that you're at an age where the roles are more complex and more dynamic. They have more nuance to them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's sort of like a cart and horse question, but yes, absolutely. I've never taken a job thinking like, oh, this is an award style performance, but I definitely absolutely take jobs now knowing that this is the era of my career that I've been waiting for so long, right? That in the last 6 or 7 years, the last 4 or 5 things that I've done, I've been able to work in large or small ways inside of productions that are examining things that I find very interesting, or questions that I'm asking myself. And yeah, when you get to this place in your life, the characters generally are not, the son, the boyfriend, the best friend.
Right.
There's a little bit, hopefully a little bit more depth to chew on.
Yeah, and I mean, you really can't predict how the material will resonate with audiences, but I'm sure when you were reading the script, you're like, oh, this is like really something different.
Yeah, I mean, so it's different for my career. I've never been given the opportunity to play somebody like this before. I've also never, I think it's unusual to center the villain in the way that Patrick chose to center the villain here, to take the time and give that character the opportunity to be relatable before he becomes this monstrous figure at the end. I found that really compelling, both as an audience member just reading the scripts, but also as an actor. Like, what an opportunity, instead of just being the bad guy, I was given the opportunity to create a little sympathy for the devil, which I think is a very compelling place to tell this story from. So, so yeah, I mean, the richness of, I guess when I think about characters, I'm always trying to find the truth, right? The nicest compliment I ever heard one actor give another actor was Michael Keaton talking about Robert Duvall. And he said, no matter, in all things that he does, no matter what he's saying or doing on camera, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, he's telling the truth. Mm. And it really stuck with me when I watched. I was like, yeah, wow, that's like the greatest thing that we can try to achieve in doing this crazy job that we do, is just telling the truth, right? Making you feel like you can understand me as a human on that screen.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Patrick, and he really has a knack for, telling you stories about difficult, nuanced, polarizing figures and getting to the humanity of them with Dr. Death, now with Plainsville. So that must have been just like a treat to kind of find and unpack.
I mean, it's a treat to, he had done so much of the legwork. I mean, there's so much resource material when I joined the project that, it's a treat to have. It's a treat to indulge that nerdy part of myself that's like, yeah, send me the Dropbox. I will absolutely get into the transcripts. Like, that sounds like fun to me. But it's also, I have to give him credit as an on-set presence. He had lived with the story for so long, and he knew it so well that he also became, like, he was our Wikipedia page for the whole story. So you'd have, what if this, that, or the other thing? And if it was a good idea, then yeah, roll with it. But if not, he could literally be like, well, the reason you don't want to change this piece here is because these other 8 pieces down the line, it pops back up, and that's important, and we want to have that. And I love, to me, that sort of, usually you talk about this in kind of the science fiction context, but to me, that's like universe building, right? That's world building. And when you are detail oriented, like he's detail oriented, you allow the audience to suspend their disbelief, because whatever it is that you're trying to put over, so long as that universe abides by its own rules, and this is like my bête noire as a sci-fi fan, like, I'll believe anything so long as you believe it too, right? As a storyteller. So long as, if you want to create these set of rules, great, then that's the set of rules. And as long as the story can fit inside of those set of rules, I'll go with you forever and ever. But as soon as you start breaking your own rules for the convenience of your plotting or a character or whatever, then you lose me and I'm angry. And it really, he had conceptualized of this whole thing and was able to contain it in his mind throughout the entire filming process. So we could bounce off of him any idea or any question, or like, in 1998, when this thing happened, does that mean that X, Y, and Z happened? And he was there and present for all of it. He was a real joy to work with.
And I love the whole through line of the American healthcare system, because that comes up in other stories, but it's always about how the healthcare system is financially robbing people. We know about that. But within this, it's like the systemic failures of reporting and vetting process, which I thought was really significant.
I mean, look, there are so many things problematic about the medical system in the States and how it's constructed. And one of the things, it's hard to tell a story about an important topic in a way that's still compelling. And so I think one of the things that was interesting to Patrick in telling this story was that while we are absolutely telling the story of Christopher Dunch and his creation and unraveling, and the heroic journey of two other doctors who like really put their necks out on the line to take this man down. The story that Patrick really wanted to tell was that bigger story of why is this system allowed to continue when all of the not all of the outcomes, but when so often the outcomes are so bad. And frankly, when the outcomes are good, it's mostly by accident, right? It's that your interests and the interests of the profit motive aligned, not that your interests were put ahead of the profit motive. And you see some of the same difficulties in the storytelling in a show like Dope Sick, right? It's hard to tell that story and not and make it a human drama and not the system is fucked and you need to change the system story. And to pull that off it's quite a feat that Patrick was able to do that, because he uses the thrust of the story to imply the things rather than having to like tell you that the system is fucked. But you get to the same place at the end, which is, wow, the system is fucked.
Right. It's never happy.
I'm just going to keep on cursing in this interview just to make it as unusable as possible for you.
Listen, we can run anything. We can run anything.
Oh, okay, good.
And for your character, we do see a little bit of him in the college years, and that goes back to what you were saying, that it's unpacking who he was, how he led down, how he could possibly be led down this path. For you, I was wondering, how was it to embody that youthfulness, that lightness that you get from just being young and carefree in the world?
Well, yeah. I mean, at this point in my life, it's a sense memory exercise.
Not that I'm calling you old, by the way.
I mean, hey, look, honestly, I earned every single one of these, all of these. I'm very proud of.
It's life experience.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't trade any of those experiences for the world. So, but from a character opportunity place, I love that chance to go and be with him in the innocent space, because it really sets up, and particularly the scenes toward the end of that episode with his parents, it really sets up him as a human being, right? If you only meet him in a contemporary sense, or even in his college years, he's a little bit more formed and already onto this dark path. But meeting the man boy of 18, 19 years old, it was so critical to being able to like get this character over on the audience. But from a performance standpoint, I actually I rewatched I want to say When They See Us, but that's not it. Catch Me If You Can. Do you remember Catch Me If You Can?
Of course I do.
Okay, so I think Leonardo DiCaprio does such a brilliant job of physically characterizing youth in the younger portions of that, and I absolutely stole from some ideas from that performance, and just recollecting that there's a looseness to your limbs. You're that newborn colt at that age, right? That you haven't kind of got the rigidity and the formality. And for Dunch to be able to start in that place, right? Well, we don't technically start there, but when we go back there, you see the like kid, and we actually get to see the weight of life literally physically come over him through stages and by degrees as he starts to carry the burden of himself over the course of his life. So it was, I don't know if Patrick specifically wrote it as a like beautifully conceived physical arc, where he was thinking maybe of more of an emotional arc, but as an actor, the opportunity to play that whole spectrum was amazing.
Yeah, you do get to see like that whole transformation, especially in the later years. I was wondering, was there weight involved, or did you just like weight, or how's that?
I mean, honestly, the losing weight was harder than the gaining weight, because I'm 43 and gaining weight is very easy at this point in my life. But we shot the flashback stuff in the first couple weeks, so that's about as skinny as I can get my body these days. And then I started eating like a human again, and just started naturally filling back in, and then met sort of Dunch halfway ish, and then small prosthetics building into, yeah, by the final form, that's almost 100% prosthetic.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was, I mean, but again, even that, you know, there's so many different possibilities of how to tell this story, but to be given the opportunity to tell this character from an emotional standpoint, from a physical characteristic standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, where you do this entire gigantic arc, but it's all one piece. I've never been given that opportunity before. It was, you know, I hesitate to use the word joy because it wasn't a particularly joyful experience, but since this is my job and I do love my job, being given the opportunity of this challenge is a joy, right? There's a sense for me of like, wow, you know, I love being challenged in the work that I do, and this is really, really difficult. This is extremely challenging, and so, you know, I'm very thankful to Patrick for thinking of me for this job.
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching it, I was thinking like, oh, this must be so like physically and mentally draining on you. But then again, you're an actor, so you naturally want that challenge. So
Yeah, we're a sick bunch, but yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you know, I don't know that I would call it. I mean, it's hard, right? You go through a lot for any character that's worth playing. You go through a lot. Each one presents its own difficulties, but for this one, to live inside of that space, and also it was really good on the page, and I was working with a bunch of really good people. So there's that sense of like, man, don't fuck this up. You know, there's an opportunity to do something that could actually be pretty wonderful here, and it will, you know, take an intense attention to detail, and then also you know, an emotional freedom, and then also the cognitive dissonance of playing somebody who has an almost inverted emotional response to human suffering, right? Because that in the same way that the two ways that actors give themselves away best, I think, are laughing and kissing, because they're automatic responses, right? If I see you force a laugh, I can tell that you're forcing a laugh. And in the same way, like when two people are just about to kiss, you can tell like there's just a little hesitation. They don't want to kiss. And so, you know, playing somebody whose automatic response to emotional stimuli is self, never empathy, always self, was a lot to just make that an automatic response.
and given that he is such a polarizing figure, there is, you know, the awards response, and then there's the audience response, and those are two totally different responses. So like, I was wondering, what have you received? Has anyone stopped you on the street or?
I mean, I can make it even, I can make it even more personal than stop me on the street. COVID maybe has spared me from like people throwing things at me on the street, but my mother-in-law, who was living with us at the time after we finished in New York, or was living with us in New York, helping with the baby, or really keeping the parents alive while we helped with the baby. She walked out of, when I finally got the not the final cut, but like not the first rough assemblage, I guess, with music. She walked out 2/3 of the way into the pilot and didn't talk to me for the rest of the night, because she was just like, oh, wow. Nope, don't want to deal with you at all. That is dark. That is evil. You go sit over there and I'll deal with you tomorrow.
The true mark of an effective performance. So.
Yeah.
And I love how, you know, we've been saying that television is going through a golden age, and I feel like it's kind of always been a little golden. And the television streaming has been, you know, pushing that forward, and now audiences have completely different relationships to a television series. Like I remember, you know, this is dating back, but like watching Dawson's Creek, that was appointment television.
Right,
watching
right.
like the promo leading up to the Scream parody episode, that was a moment, you know? So it's completely changed how we consume television, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the paradigm, I mean, it exists for some people, but really broadly speaking, the paradigm that you and I grew up with is gone now, right? And, you know, partially it's because these have changed the way that we communicate, period. But what the streaming era has meant to the way that content is disseminated, even in places where it's disseminated week by week on a more traditional release schedule, that it just, those days are gone now. But what is interesting to me is you still every once in a while, and Dr. Death had this, a version of this impact, but I'm thinking of like giant outsized like phenomena like Squid Game, right? That still can actually be the mythical water cooler show, and it can be the water cooler show even though not everybody's watching it at the same time, and it can be the water cooler show for the entire planet at the same time, which is a completely new thing that we have created. And people talk about the golden era of television, I think because there's still that residual like snobbishness about TV.
Right.
So it's like, oh, now you have elevated yourself into being in the conversation of what is actually good, which, as you rightly said, is total horseshit. I mean, there, from era to era to era to era, there have been so many, going down back to the Honeymooners to I Love Lucy. I mean, you go back through the history of television, and so many very important, groundbreaking pieces of like cultural entertainment have come out of television. But the big thing that has changed, I think, which I think is so exciting, is the production value that is both possible and is now being spent on, but in what is television, is unlike anything that has ever come before, right? The level of quality that is expected in your average TV show or a streaming show or whatever we're calling them now is so much higher than what you could get away with. So the audience's expectation is like, no, you have to be really good, right? So there can be no more cynicism of like, well, episodes like 14 through 16 don't really matter. It's between sweeps, whatever. We're gonna do like you can't. They got to be all hits, no misses. You got to really fine tune. And I think it's good that in general we've brought the orders down from 22 to a workable schedule, because it allows us to at least attempt to achieve that quality.
Right. And I think some of it has to do with also, the downsizing of opportunities of what can be in the theaters. COVID aside, we saw like prior to that, the mid-level films were kind of dying out. So I just think that really also goes to that as well.
Yeah, well, and that it breaks my heart to a certain extent, because those are the movies that I was raised on, and that's actually why I do my job, right? It was those movies, watching those with my mom, and her like giving me a film education. My fascination of this business and of the business of storytelling, while I loved E.T. and I loved Jaws, was much more about seeing Brazil for the first time than it was about seeing the first Star Wars movie. And so it is, I think, a shame that the studios have, the independent world still exists, but the studios have moved out of that business mostly. But it has meant that all of that talent is now looking for spaces to express itself. And what it's mostly done is express itself in like 8 and 10 and 12 episode bits. And I actually think that is a better, whether it's 6 episodes or 12 episodes, I think that's a better format for storytelling than 120 minutes. 120 minutes works for a very specific thing, but if Ordinary People was great at 120 minutes, I bet that there's 4 more episodes in there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you could sit with those characters for another 5 or 6 hours and still have plenty to say. And so that, to me, if I'm willing to take on the concept of the golden era, that to me is really what it is that we've broken out of the rigid paradigms of like, this is a 120-minute story. This is a 24-hour-a-year story. And we've actually found more spaces where things fit better. It's good that Black Panther is a movie, right? That's a big spectacle, amazing, jaw-dropping design, over the top. Oh my God. Like you sit back in your chair for 2 hours and you walk out and you're like amazed at the thing that you've just watched. But I think Ozark is better as a 5-season show. I would have missed a lot if that was just 120 minutes,
Right. And before I let you go, I just have to ask you about Fatal Attraction. When it was announced, I was very excited, very intrigued, and
Me
then
too.
they announced like Lizzie Kaplan. I was like, holy crap, that's an amazing pairing.
Yeah, no, we're just now doing, well, the writers have been at it for a while, but we're just now doing the ramp up. So I'm in a very giddy space right now with all of the possibilities and opportunities that the executive producer director is a woman named Silver Tree, who comes off of but most recently a Flight Attendant. The first season, I haven't seen the second season yet, but the first season was fantastic. So I'm extremely excited to work with her. The cast is coming together, and in the way that that's a movie that I saw when I was a kid, and I was way over my head. And I probably saw it again as a young adult, and it stuck with me that time. And now to have the opportunity to go back into that story that is stuck in everybody's consciousness someplace, because it's one of those movies that just like, there are lines from it, everybody knows a scene from it, everybody knows a line from it, it just is stuck in the cultural consciousness. And to bring that story into right now and really get into that character, to let Lizzie's character breathe a little bit and get into her psychological underpinnings, I think is going to be a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the next conversation too.
Me too.
Have a good one. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Good talking to you again.
Bye.